Good evening, and welcome to Conversations with Lothrop. We're very pleased you can be here this evening with us. I'm Richard Lothrop, and I'll be your host for the next 30 minutes or so. We're very honored tonight to have as our guest a very special lady, Barbara Pierce. She was born in Atlanta and spent what I would like to think of as formative years. In fact, I think she used that phrase somewhere, I think you did, in the Pittsburgh area. She's a graduate of Oberlin College, an English major, Phi Beta Kappa, and received some other awards. One is the recording for the Blind Recording Award for Outstanding Senior, and she was selected as a Presidential Scholar. And that meant you were received by President Johnson. Is that right?
That's right.
I'll bet that was an interesting experience.
Very interesting.
And how many of you were there?
Three.
Three of you. Mm-hmm. And you've never washed that hand since, have you? Yes.
Well, he actually had sort of firm hold of my arm. He apparently enjoyed being with young women.
I have read something to that, I think, somewhere. She married one of her professors, her English professor, Bob Pierce, and they have three grown children who are doing interesting things. She has co-authored two books, the high school poetry text, entitled The Design of Poetry. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Was that with Bob?
It was.
That was with your husband. And Media and the Message, a public relations handbook for nonprofit agencies. For a number of years, she served as assistant director of the Oberlin College Alumni Association. She's now active in the National Federation for the Blind. And are you now PR, or public relations director still?
Yes, I still am.
Still are. And you've been active in the Ohio Federation of the Blind. And are you still associate editor of their magazine?
I'm the editor.
Editor now. You've had a promotion.
Oh, I've been the editor for about 6 years now.
Oh, my word. It shows how far behind my notes are. But we're delighted that you're here tonight.
I'm very pleased to be here, Dick.
Thanks. It's great to have you. Let's start with the term blind. In this PC world, is that what we should be saying, or should we be saying visually impaired, or what should we say?
Blind.
Blind. Okay.
If you have 10% or less of the vision that a person with 20/20 vision has, you are legally blind. And the word is blind. It is not visually impaired. It's not hard of seeing. It's not visually challenged. People who have less than 10% of vision are blind.
Blind. Well, we settled that one.
Yes.
Everybody make notes on that, please. Okay. Now, I believe you, I understand that you lost your sight gradually as a child.
Yeah, probably I was injured at birth. Mm-hmm. And it took them a while to decide that there was something wrong, and then it took them a while longer to discover that it was degenerative. Mm-hmm. So I started in public schools because I could read the print in the first grade primer, and I stayed there because my parents were determined that I was not going to be yanked out of my family and sent off to a school for the blind.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you, now you can see some light, in other words, things are not totally black.
Yeah, virtually no one who is blind sees blackness. Mm-hmm. If your eyes have been removed, mm-hmm. then you no more see blackness than you do out of the back of your head. Mm-hmm. And if you do have some acuity of some sort, then of course you're not seeing blackness.
Mm-hmm. So this would make these tests that psychology classes do and so forth, where they blindfold people and have them, not as realistic as they might be, would they?
Yeah, we are very much opposed. We in the National Federation of the Blind are pretty clearly opposed to short-term simulations, disability simulations, because for two reasons, really. One is you put a blindfold on, and first of all, you know you can take it off. Mm-hmm. And so that's not equivalent to the experience of being blind. But on the other hand, you have no skills. You've developed no skills for dealing with blindness, and so you come away from the experience thinking, there but for the grace of God go I, good heavens, anything but that. Mm-hmm. And that is not a constructive way to have the public thinking about blindness.
Mm-hmm. Now let me ask another question that rather intrigued me when I thought about it. Is it, from your experience with other people and talking with many people who are blind. Is it easier not to have ever had sight, or is it easier to have had sight and then lost it, or doesn't it make any difference?
Well,
An adjustment,
yeah.
that's what I'm thinking of.
I would say that there are advantages to having it happen either way, and there are disadvantages to having it happen either way. In my experience, well-adjusted people tend to believe that the way it happened to them was the best way to have it happen, and poorly adjusted people tend to think that the way it happened to them was the worst way it could have happened. So, you know, in either case, what it comes down to is that you've been dealt a hand,
Yes.
and you can decide to play it or to throw your cards in. And if you decide to play it, then you might as well play it with all the style and all the skill that you can muster.
Can you tell me approximately how many blind people there are in the United States, approximately?
It's hard to know because there is still so much secrecy. There is such a sense of shame about blindness, that's I think because by and large people don't like to be pitied, and mostly people are very good at pitying blind people. So people will go to great lengths to pretend that they're not blind. They pretend to still be able to read the paper and all that sort of thing. So as nearly as we can tell, about half a percentage point of the population is legally blind or more.
Okay.
So you could, you know, figure it out for any population group of roughly what it should be.
So that's about the same for Lorain County, you would
Right,
guess. Okay.
right.
And we have some in Oberlin, I believe, and some in the student body of the college.
Yes, yes, as a matter of fact, there are.
All right, let's see. Let's talk about mobility. We have the white cane, we have a guide dog, we have no aids whatsoever. I believe you have a preference for the cane. How do you decide, how does a person decide which of these aids and would be best for that person, and what is your general feeling about this?
Well, a lot of people, especially people who lose sight in later years, tend to just evolve into some method or another, and the method tends to be spouse's arm in the later years, so that one is lucky when one actually makes a decision. A lot of people never quite make a decision. They just sort of muddle along.
Fall into it, so to
Exactly,
speak.
and then fall over it because they can't see very well.
Yes.
But you're right. The two primary means of mobility are the white cane and the guide dog. What makes people decide which? If you read the literature of the dog guides, the schools, they will say that they believe that blind people should be able to use a white cane first, and that is correct, because you really do have to be able to orient yourself in the world. You've got to be able to do mental mapping. You have to be able to maintain a notion of where north is, and if I was heading north and I turned 45 degrees, what direction am I going? And I turn another 45 degrees, oh, I'm going to be going west, or I'm going to be going east, depending on which way you go. You know, you've got to be able to maintain that kind of grasp on your world in your head. And that's an easy step to skip if you go straight to hanging on to the harness of a dog, and depending upon that dog's vision to keep you out of mischief. Mostly people who have not had an opportunity to get good cane travel training are attracted to guide dogs because the dog represents to them more independence and freedom of movement than they feel comfortable taking for themselves using the cane. So the dog is very often the method chosen by people who want to be independent and haven't had good cane travel training.
You brought a cane along.
Yes.
your cane here. Could you show it to
I
us?
use a cane.
Show us how you use it.
This is a carbon fiber cane. Am I safe to stand up
Yes,
here?
you can.
Okay,
Yes, we'll-
wonderful.
Yeah. I think we'll get you in. We may get part of you in anyway.
Okay, you can tell when a person travels rapidly, the cane tends to be longer because the cane represents stopping distance.
I see.
You can tell that I tend to travel fairly quickly because I use a long cane. You use the cane in front of you like this, and you describe an arc the width of your shoulders, like this, in
Oh, I
front
see.
of you.
As
And so
you
now,
walk.
this does not catch overhanging tree limbs, which is why I'm always after my neighbors, please to trim the trees and to check what happens when it's rainy and those leaves come down. But this is the way, this is a perfectly safe way to travel. And you see, as soon as you come to a drop off or a step up, the cane tip finds it out ahead of me, and then I can move up to it and negotiate whatever it is. So that if my cane is going to hit something, I won't. People in airports are forever yelping after me and trying to grab me because my cane is going to hit one of those signs or a chair or something. And what they don't understand is that I hope the cane is going to hit it. If it's right in my path, then I hope the cane will hit it. For if the cane does, then I can avoid it. So people shouldn't be nervous when they see that a person's cane is going to come in contact with something. The cane isn't going to break. This cane is made of carbon fiber. It's very strong. This is a telescoping cane.
That's wonderful. Oh, boy.
And then
in
I
your
can
purse if you want
put
to.
That's right. Well, a large purse. I can put it in a briefcase at any rate. I prefer a straight cane, which does not collapse, just because that gives a little more certainty, and it's not going to, a section of it's not going to come loose crossing the middle of a street. It's a little unsettling in an intersection to have one section of the cane break down on you. So if I'm going to walk a distance, I prefer a straight cane.
Okay, this leads right into what you mentioned people in the airport. What should people do to help blind people, and what should they not do?
Well, the first thing, if a person thinks that a blind person might require assistance, the thing to do is to ask. May I help you? Could I give you some information? Is there something I could do to help? You know, a question like that. That's not a real difficult thing to do, although it's very hard for some people to do that. The next step is the one that people seem to have a lot of difficulty with, and that is listen to the answer. If the answer is no thank you, then have the courtesy to treat the blind person as you would any other adult. Go away. If the person says, thank you, I'm doing fine, then go away. That's it. But if the person does require assistance, then listen to the kind of assistance. I'm very often asked when I'm traveling alone in an airport, can you tell me where Pier D is? Well, obviously, if you don't know where Pier D is, then the answer is no. If you do, then it'd be helpful, rather than abandoning your own plans and insisting upon walking me to Pier D, what I'm looking for is information. You're going the right way, another 100 yards and hang a right. Or then you better ask somebody. If it gets too complex for you at that point, then just say, then ask somebody. Because if the directions are too hard to give, then don't try to give them. But that's what I would say. Ask, listen, and then give the kind of help that's been requested if it's within your power to do so. If it's not convenient to do so, then the thing to say is, oh golly, I'd like to, but I'm going to miss my plane, or here's a member of the airline staff, perhaps he could help you, or but people should not stop what they're doing.
And they also shouldn't touch you, should they?
Well, that's right. I mean, people don't like to be grabbed. If you're going to offer to assist someone, then offer to let that person take your arm. Now, I say that, and yet sometimes I'm carrying luggage and I'm using a white cane, and I am not going to stop using my cane in order to take someone's arm. And sometimes I will, and this is probably, someone will demand that I wash my mouth out with soap for saying this, but there are times when if someone is insistent upon walking with me, and it's a little difficult for a blind person to walk beside another person and just keep walking exactly in a straight line. And if I'm pulling luggage and using a white cane, I don't have a hand free left to hold on to somebody. So I will say, well, why don't you just take hold of my briefcase, which is slung over my shoulder, so that we can stay together. But do it upon invitation. People are forever grabbing blind people in ways that they would never grab a sighted adult.
It's sort of like people tending to yell at people who are hard of hearing, isn't it?
Well, or yelling at a blind person.
Yes.
People get all mixed up about what the disability entails.
We're talking about senses here a little bit, or we certainly are bordering on it, and so let's do it. It's my understanding that most of the senses of a fully visioned person, most of the information is picked up first by the eyes, or certainly a great deal of it is, and hearing and smell are less. Whereas, say, in a dog, it would be the nose obviously first, and then the eyes, and probably, or hearing, I guess, and then the eyes. If somebody loses their sight, do they become more aware of the other senses than they would have?
I'm glad you posed the question the way you did. The way I usually hear this is in a statement that says 80% of everything we know comes to us through our eyes. Well, once you've had that kind of a statement made, what does that say about a blind person? Well, you've got 20% of what the rest of us have got. That's nuts. That's not true. But the way you said it is correct. Sighted people tend to pay a lot of attention to visual information. But that does not mean that visual information is the only kind that comes through. If you, as a matter of fact, it's fun to work with young children because they're so open to the world that you can get them to close their eyes and start listening, and the whole world just comes alive to them in ways that they simply haven't been paying attention to before. And that really is what we're dealing with. The brain can only deal with one set of data at a time. Take that set of data away, and there's all kinds of other data that's just right there waiting to be paid attention to. So it isn't that a blind person's other senses become more acute. It is simply that one pays attention to the information. My youngsters are very good at making sense of auditory detail, and it's because when they were young children, they had the example of a parent who operated on auditory detail. Get out of that cookie jar, because I knew the sound of the cookie jar lid opening from 3 rooms away. And they quickly learned that you could get away with swiping cookies from the cookie jar if Dad was babysitting because he was watching television and he never heard the cookie jar. Mom, you couldn't get away from.
Let me ask you one other question, and then we'll go for our break. Believe it or not, we're right up at that time. You travel a lot for the Federation of the Blind, I believe.
Right.
And I guess to Baltimore a good deal, don't you? Is that their
our
headquarters?
headquarters is in Baltimore. Yeah.
And sometimes there are problems, I imagine, that other people don't have to put up with, trying as air traffic may be these days. But this brings us to something that I think made us all aware of some of the problems, and that was back, I think, wasn't it in 1986 or so? You had a little exciting round with TWA.
Yes, I was arrested by TWA.
I think that's so exciting.
Yes, well, it was less than exciting at the time.
You're the first guest I've ever had that I know of has been arrested.
With a criminal career? Well, yes, I don't know. I've actually been through St. Louis since then, and my picture's not up in the police station
that's
there.
Good. Yeah.
But the airlines had rules that said that blind people couldn't sit in exit rows, and the FAA was silent on the matter. They didn't particularly care one way or the other, and so I was assigned by a TWA gate agent to an exit row seat. I was standing there with my white cane in my hand. She assigned me to the seat. I realized that I was seated in an exit row. I got luckily I was traveling with my secretary. I got her to read me the card, which most people don't ever look at, and I got her to read me all of the complex writing on the exit door, which was the word pull, and checked out how the door operated, and then sat and waited. And when the crew turned up and said that I had to move, I said no, I wasn't going to move. She tried to tell me that there was an FAA official on board who told me that I should move, and I said, send him here and we'll talk about FAA regulations. And of course there was no FAA person on board. There was, however, across the aisle from me, a man with a cane, an orthopedic cane that had been stowed above his head, and he couldn't stand up without the cane. Nobody objected to his sitting in that seat. And he was not happy when I pointed out the fact that he was sitting there and he couldn't get up and move, and he couldn't get out of that door quickly, whereas I was perfectly able to, could quote to her what the door said. There was not a reason in the world why I couldn't sit there. And we had a long talk. The first set of police officers sent on board refused to arrest me. They said, this is TWA's rule, and this woman seems perfectly capable of dealing with an emergency to us. We're not going to get in the way here. The second set, however, said they're going to be in big trouble for not having arrested you, so we're going to take you off. And they took me off to the police station and read me my Miranda rights. And I didn't get fingerprinted though, so I don't really have a police record.
Okay, that's good. Now, has FAA changed this at all since then?
Well,
maybe some good things came out of that.
No, good things did not come out of it. We were struggling to get a law passed, which was in colloquies on both the House and the Senate floors. The members stood up and said, now we understand that the intent of this law is to protect blind people from being forced to move out of rows, the embarrassment of having attention called, and it is our intention that people who are capable of sitting in these rows ought to be able to sit there. But as I understand it, the key FAA official had a doddering, elderly, blind aunt who was totally incapable of doing anything. And she, by golly, knew what blind people were capable of, because she had her old Aunt Susie. And she was going to be damned and double damned, and so were we, before she was going to let anything through that was going to let a blind person in an exit row. So the end of the whole thing, or at least temporarily the end, has been that the FAA recrafted its regulations in the light of this new law. And the regulations, if you listen to the pattern now at the beginning, they are now formulated so that they very carefully say, they delineate certain abilities that you've got to have. You have to be able to lift an 80-pound door. You have to be able to observe a fire on the wing. You have to be able to hear and understand the directions from the cabin crew and give directions to other people. And if you can't do these things, then they're going to be moved out of the exit row.
And also not to open the door at 39,000
Well,
feet.
yes, you have to have enough wit not to do that,
like
yes.
That. Well, let's take our break, and we'll be back in just about a minute or minute and a half or so.
1997, the most exciting year yet for home and garden television. Now we've added even more informative, entertaining, and inspirational programs to our schedule. And we're kicking it off with a whole host of great new series. Kitty Bartholomew answers viewers' letters and solves their decorating dilemmas on Ask Kitty.
Go ahead, challenge me, make my day.
Plus, world-famous gardener Penelope Hobhouse shows us the art and practice of gardening. Then, if you can collect it, it's fair game for collectible treasures. Do-it-yourselfers get a first-hand look from the experts at building and remodeling projects with hands-on. Learn the tricks of the trade behind buying and selling a home with Location, 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 hosted by Money Magazine editor Tyler Matheson.
How to look, when to buy, and how to save money.
And HGTV is proud to present the PBS hit, The New Yankee Workshop, hosted by Norm Abram for the first time on cable TV.
Fire up your power tools and get ready.
Friday nights are getting really exciting because we're adding even more new programs to our HGTV International Hour, starting with the English Country Garden, Homes by Design, and Quest for the Rose, a worldwide venture into the history of our favorite flower.
You have to fall in love with the rose.
HGTV's specials bring a variety of topics home to our viewers. Joe Ruggiero takes you on a designer's tour of France with the best of Parisian design and the best of French country design.
Join me as I take you behind the scenes to see the French designers in their own homes.
Then African Design, American Homes explore the influence of Africa's culture and art on American interiors. The Living Garden, an Earth Day special. Building a New Beginning, community members help the homeless build homes for themselves. And 3 different specials on America's home styles, including the Victorian, the Ranch, and the Colonial. And 5 new specials to help viewers who are just getting started in quilts, sewing, wine, crafts, and hobbies.
Intrigued? Great! Let's get started.
As always, we're taking viewers on location inside the trade shows closed to the consumer.
If it's for the home, it is here. But you know what? This is not open to the public. But I've got good news for you. I've got your backstage pass.
And this year, the HGTV World Garden Tour is extending into all new countries around the globe. The place to be in 1997 is right here at home. Home and Garden Television, the only cable network devoted to everything you love about home.
And we're back with you again, and I believe in a moment the number will be scrolled if you wish to call. And there it is. If you wish to talk with Barbara Pierce, just give us a call. In the meantime, let me ask you about education and Braille. Which I understand was a brainchild of Louis Braille in France in the 1800s, something like that. Should all people use that? Should everybody
All
know?
blind
people,
right.
Should they all know how to use that?
Well, it depends on a couple of things. One is, can the person read print comfortably for a long period of time in any kind of conditions? And very often you find in schools that they're having children who can read for half an hour at a time, or if they dim the lights and close the blinds and get the right kind of contrast on the page and so on. But so that's one thing. If you can read for any length of time, and the other thing is, if you have the sensitivity left in your fingers. People with diabetes very often have got some numbing of the fingertips, and therefore it really is genuinely difficult for them to feel the dots. But if there's no problem with the hands, and if there isn't any kind of a palsy or tremor in the hands, and if the person can't read print for an extended period of time, then yes, Braille really is a wonderful tool of literacy. Everybody needs to be able to read and write. If they're going to live a full and productive life, I mean, imagine not being able to read and write independently. That's a real disadvantage.
Now, Braille actually is raised symbols that represent letters.
Combinations of dots to make both letters and word abbreviations, and partial word abbreviations.
Now, some states, I understand, require Braille literacy for.
Well,
is that true?
It's not exactly there are 28 states, including Ohio, I'm proud to say, have passed Braille literacy laws, and those laws, well, there's a lot of variety in them, but the best of those laws say that if a parent wants Braille, and the teachers don't think that it's necessary, but the parent does, then the child, the legally blind child, has a right to learn Braille. And so this has ramifications, because that means then that the special education teachers for blind children really do need to know Braille, and that's where a lot of the resistance comes in. They don't know Braille. They may have had a course or two as they were training, but they never got comfortable enough at it, a lot of them, to embrace the notion of teaching Braille, and so they haven't done it very much, and so that means that what they knew they've forgotten, and so then they start finding reasons why it's not necessary to teach it, and so you get this sort of vicious spiral downward, and it's most unfortunate.
I read somewhere that the number of people learning Braille has decreased dramatically in the last few years. Is that correct?
Yeah, 25 years ago, half the legally blind children in the public school, in the schools, residential and public school system in this country, were taught and were reading Braille. Now, some of them were reading print also, but half of them were reading Braille. That number is down to just above 9%. Mm-hmm. Now, that's not because the kids got dumber, although there is an increase in the number of multiply handicapped children. So there is some, that does provide some reason for the numbers to have slipped some. But it is mostly that teachers more and more are making the case, the tape recorder began it, because as the cassette player became light and easy to carry, the notion was, oh well, you can use a tape recorder. You can write down things on a tape recorder and keep track of them that way. There is nothing more discouraging than having a pile of 8 or 10 tapes and knowing that the one telephone number you need right now is somewhere on one of those 8 or 10 tapes. This is not efficient. And therefore, if there's any way of teaching Braille, it ought to be done. The other thing that people need to bear in mind is that just as when young children learn to read print at 5 and 6 years of age, they will gain real facility at it, a facility that they would not have gained if they had learned to read as adults. So Braille readers, if they are taught Braille as young children, gain a facility that they never get if they don't learn it until later. People who learn to read Braille as youngsters can read Braille up to some 400 words a minute. Speaking speed is about 120 words a minute. So you see, that's a very useful speed for Braille reading. But I was not taught Braille as a youngster. I learned it when I was 12, but I never even understood that a person could read it well until I was in my 30s. And I am still struggling to get good Braille reading speed as a result of that.
And you can also write with Braille, can't you?
You can
Is
write
Braille, your
with a slate and stylus. You can write with a 6-keyed typewriter. And you can take a computer and put commands into a Braille file, and with a Braille translation program, throw it to a Braille embosser and just simply print out. A person who doesn't know Braille can produce Braille documents.
Oh, wonderful.
This is a revolution for youngsters coming along. Now, there's more Braille available for young kids than there ever was before.
You know, it used to be that some of the states, at least, if not all of them, had state schools for the blind. Is that still true?
There are a lot of state schools. There are about 80 schools that would be characterized as residential schools for the blind. Ohio has one in Columbus. You can't necessarily get taught Braille there either, by the way. It's there, but you have to fight for it even at Columbus.
Barbara, let me throw two. Well, I have 4 here. See if we can get through these, maybe. Quotations, all of them from a learned lady who seemed to know something about this subject. We'll let the guests, our viewers, guess who the authoress is. One of them, but these were 4 quotations that I liked, and I thought perhaps you could just comment, or if you would, on them.
Sure.
First one is, blindness doesn't have to be a catastrophe. It can be reduced to a level of nuisance.
I really do genuinely believe that. Now, let me be clear about it. Blindness frequently is a tragedy. It doesn't have to be anymore. If the person gets good training, and that's a big if, that's hard to come by, and if the person has genuine opportunity, and again, the level of discrimination, not based on hatred, but based on pity and the capacity that people have to close their eyes and then walk into the coffee table, results very often in people not giving blind people a real chance. But if blind people have a chance, and if they've got the skills, the alternative techniques of blindness, then mostly blind people can do what they want to do.
Okay, let's try a quotation number. You did beautifully with that.
Thank you.
You'd
It's
almost
a concept I know
almost
about.
think you had written it. You said it. Okay, let's try this one. Before a blind person will believe in himself, almost always someone else has to believe in him first.
Yes. The key to effective rehabilitation for blind people is positive attitudes. And positive attitudes don't just come full-blown. You can't inoculate a person with a positive attitude. And for blind people, so often the key is some one person or couple of people, very often in the family, who refuse to throw a pity party or attend the pity party that the blind person is busy throwing, but who say instead, I know we can find a way for you to be able to do this. Let's think about it. What can we do? And once you begin that cycle of, I believe in you, then the blind person has something to hang on to try to believe in himself. That's one reason why role models are so important. We try so hard to get parents of blind children and blind youngsters in touch with competent blind adults so that they both can begin to see that there's a possibility of a future here, and then the parents can start expecting the kids to empty the trash and do their homework and make their beds and pack their own lunches, you know, all the things that they'd expect of a child who could see.
Here's another one. The blind leading the blind and the sighted.
In the field of blindness, it seems to me that the blind must lead the blind. You know, we waited around for millennia for well-meaning sighted people to help blind people, and we continued to be down and out and picking up the crumbs of what fell off of society's table. It wasn't until 1940 when the blind gathered together and said, enough of this, we are going to find ourselves a voice and articulate what it is that we must have in order to achieve equality and to take our place as fully contributing citizens. And from the time that happened on November the 16th of 1940, we really haven't looked back. We've been punched in the head a few times, but basically we have continued to move forward into to a point where we really can participate, not demanding rights only, but demanding the right to assume our responsibilities.
And the last part of that, and the sighted, is to train the sighted how to deal with blind
how to
people.
think, because you know, a large portion of the blind population of tomorrow is currently sighted. And their attitudes about their own blindness will be shaped by their attitudes about blindness today. If we're going to have a chance to give them a chance, we must get at those attitudes and reshape them into attitudes of positive optimism. That's the only solution.
And the last one. The only stupid questions about blindness are the ones you are too nervous to ask. And here I've been asking them for...
And there you are. And that is precisely, that's the wonderful part about talking with children, because they are completely uninhibited. And so they will ask really some very naive questions. But if the question is niggling away at a person's mind, then that person is unable to hear the rest of what I have to say about blindness. You must get out the question you need to ask.
Well, we've just about wound this down, believe it or not. Are there final comments you'd like to make?
I would like to say what a wonderful thing it is to live in a town like Oberlin. Those of us who live in small towns really, yeah, we don't have the public transportation that you have in New York City. But you know, there is something wonderful about having a population of the size of Oberlin's, because I do have a chance to shape the attitudes. People may not genuinely believe in my competence, but at least after an evening like this, they'll tend to keep their mouths shut and let me go ahead and do what I want to do. And mostly in a town the size of this one, people will come to me when they hear about someone who is blind. And that's what the Federation is all about: blind people helping other blind people and the families of blind people. That's what we want to do. And in a population this size, it's very nice to be able to feel as though I'm close enough to my neighbors and my acquaintances so that people really can call me up and can ask the questions, and we can help people to find the services that they need. We can tell them when they're off base, when the kinds of things that they think they want really would not be constructive, and we can help them get the kinds of things that they do need to have. And above all, together, we really can change what it means to be blind in 21st century America.
Well, Barbara, we thank you so much for being with us tonight, and we have a gift for you. It's a Conversations with Lothrop mug with 2 chairs on it.
Thank you very much.
That will be a reminder of the show when you're having your morning coffee.
Yes.
And we do thank you so much for coming and being with us this evening. It's just been wonderful.
It's been delightful.
And we thank you for being with us so very, very much. Our next program will be a month from today, I believe, March 27th. And we'll have another interesting and stimulating guest for you. So this is Dick Lothrop saying thank you very much for having been with us this evening, and good night.